Mr. Speaker, thank you. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material on the subject of this special order.
Without objection.
Thank you. It is with great honor that I rise today to co-anchor this Congressional Black Caucus special order, 1-hour period, along with my distinguished colleague from Oregon, Representative Bynum. For the next 60 minutes, members of the Congressional Black Caucus have an opportunity to speak directly to the American people about Black History Month, an issue of great importance not only to the Congressional Black Caucus, but to Congress, the constituents we represent, and to all Americans. It's a privilege to be able to stand here before you today. Black History Month is not just an opportunity to reflect on our past, but it is certainly an opportunity to uplift our present and renew the cause to fight for our future. I want to begin with a story. Because Black History Month is often thought of as a time to recognize those historical figures that we all know, the Martin Luther Kings of the world, the John Lewises of the world, and Rosa Parks and others. But Black History Month is about more than just those who are known. It's about a lot of those who are not known. And so I want to begin with the story of a few young men in the state of Alabama. In 1969, following what history has come to label as the end of the Civil Rights Movement in 1968, in 1969, four young men had been intentionally recruited to break down a color barrier at the University of Alabama's law school. And so 8 young men walked through the doors of University of Alabama's School of Law in the fall of 1969. Among them was a young man named John, a young man named Ronald, a young man named Booker T, and a young man named Michael. And these young men, when the Civil Rights Movement had ended, the struggles to realize the progress that America had made throughout the decade plus of fighting and protesting, this is what it was about. It was about leveling those playing fields and equaling the opportunity and access for people like these young men. And so they walked through the doors as the first African Americans to come into the University of Alabama's law school. And they would all ultimately become lawyers. John England, Booker T. Fort, Ronald Jackson, and Michael Figures. Black history in America, it's a story of resilience and excellence and an unshakable pursuit of justice, an unshakable commitment to making this country be, as Martin Luther King would say, be true to what you said on paper for all of us. From the halls of Congress to the streets of our communities, Black leaders and educators and entrepreneurs and activists have shaped this nation. And yet we know that honoring this history isn't just about reflection, it's about action, because that's what we owe people. That's what we owe people. I come from Alabama, the birthplace of the Civil Rights Movement, a place when this nation and this world was experiencing injustices that we could not fathom today, a place where people, just based simply on the color of their skin, could not eat in certain places, work in certain places, be educated in certain places, live in certain places. Alabama, particularly Montgomery, Alabama, they stood up at a point when many cities and towns and people in those cities and towns across this country had a rightful fear of standing up in that way. Montgomery said no. So in 1955, when they launched a bus boycott, little did they know that they were giving rise to the greatest civil movement that the world has ever seen, that the world has ever known, led by a young minister who was a mere 26 years old at the time, Martin Luther King Jr. This movement will give rise to what America proudly holds itself out to be today, and that is that place of equal opportunity, that place of equal access, that place of equal justice. But this is a movement that was rooted in people who had a faith in a nation, that when history looks back, or when we look back at history rather, we wonder, how could they? How could people who come from such a history of segregation and degradation and slavery and Jim Crow? How could they remain steadfast in a commitment to a country? How could they have that love for a country that history had shown them did not love them in the same manner? But they held it because they knew that the greatness of America was really about what America could be and what it could be for them. Even if they came here in the bowels of slave ships, even if they slaved as laborers in cotton fields, they knew that one day America could be better for them and could be better for their children and their grandchildren. That is what Black History Month is about. It is about recognizing the unwavering faith that people who had every reason not to have such faith maintained in this nation, and the contributions that they made to making America be true to what it said on paper. And so, it is understandable that when you have that understanding and that appreciation of where Black people in this country have come from, literally from the bottom, literally with nothing, literally as second and third and fourth class citizens and non-citizens initially. When you understand that when this building was built, people that looked like me, we could only be here for two reasons: to either build it or clean it or serve food. When you understand that when this country was formalized in a constitution, people who looked like me were not deemed to be an entire person. Barely just more than a half a person. Three-fifths of a person is what Black people were counted as. When you understand that, then you understand why many of us are very sensitive to efforts to attack things like diversity and efforts to attack things like equity and inclusion. Because we know that we come from a culture, we come from a people that had to deal with adversity, inequity, and purposeful exclusion for centuries. When all we wanted was a level playing field, when all we wanted was the same opportunities that you had. Never asked for special treatment, never wanted to be recognized in any way that you were not recognized. But they held on to that faith for this nation, and they led us to being a better place. And so when you come from that background, the several actions of this administration strike you a little bit differently. It stings a little bit more when you see things like an EEOC order that's been in place since 1962 that was meant to just make sure that people were not discriminated against is rolled back. It means something a little bit different when you see the administration hit a pause on funding to 1890 land-grant institution scholarships while not hitting pause on that funding to 1862 land-grant scholarships to those schools. It hits a little bit different when Auburn University, a predominantly white institution, is not impacted, but Alabama A&M University and Tuskegee University are impacted. One must ask, what is the difference between an 1862 school, a Texas A&M, an Auburn University, an LSU, and an 1890 school, an Alabama A&M, a Tuskegee? And when you look at the facts, it's the fact that the 1890s were historically Black colleges and universities. And so that stings a little bit different. It hits a little bit different when you understand the history of where people come from. That one of the first actions that we had to take after the administration came in was going to bat for making sure that the Tuskegee Airmen remained a part of the curriculum in training our nation's airmen. Something so basic, something so nonpartisan, something that we should all be able to agree on, that a group of men who went and put their lives on the line for a world, for a country, that when they returned home, they were still called the N-word. They were still forced to sit in the back of the bus. They were still told to take off their uniforms. They were still told that they were not good enough. They still could not send their kids to school in much of this country's public school systems. Yet because of a diversity, equity, and inclusion ban, we had to go to bat for them. And it wasn't just Democrats. There were Republicans, too, that saw that that was an issue that we should not have. Senator Katie Britt from my home state was there with us, but as was the Congressional Black Caucus and other members across this country. And so it is the attacks that we see on such things that hits a little bit different during Black History Month, because it is a failure to acknowledge the history. It's a failure to acknowledge a group of people who persevered through the worst of circumstances in this nation. A group of people who literally emerged from bondage. A group of people who emerged from torture, from rape, from kidnapping, from family separation. That's why it means so much to us. And that is why it is important that we recognize Black History Month, because contributions have been made by dozens of people, hundreds of people, thousands of people, millions of people who were not supposed to be in this country as citizens. But here we are, and here we stand. And although when this building was built, there were 0 members who looked like us, there now stand 62. And we know up and respect that history, because look, Black history is not just for me. It's not just my history. That young man named Michael Figures that walked into University of Alabama's law school, he would have a son. He would have 4 sons. One of them's name is Shamari Figures, and who stands before you today as a member of Congress because of the fights of him and the fights of those known and unknown before him. So Black history is not only my history. Black history is your history, whether you like it or not. It is our history. Black history is American history. Black history is who we are. And that is why we must continue the fight to make sure that we honor the contributions, the sacrifices that so many people have made, to make sure that we do not go back, to make sure that it is clearly understood that our efforts throughout the civil rights movement and since has only been to make sure we have a level playing field, has only been to make sure that I can't be excluded when I have the exact same qualifications as you. And so I stand here today as a proud son of a father and a mother who have both made Black history in their own right. I stand before you here today as the proud grandson of men who set the stage. Because most Black people in this country, they don't come from privilege. I consider myself to be blessed. Right? I think here in Congress we find ourselves a lot of times, we see a lot of people standing on, born on third base thinking they hit a triple. And that is the unfortunate realities of where we find ourselves. People forgetting where they came from. People forgetting what we went through. People forgetting how we got here in the first place. People forgetting the struggle. People forgetting what we overcame. People forgetting what we could not have and why we fight so hard for what we do have and to be able to maintain it in the future. Well, I don't forget. I won't forget. I cannot forget, because every day I walk in here is a reminder of what was sacrificed for me. Every day that I have the privilege of calling myself a United States citizen, a United States representative, is a reminder for me of what it took for myself and for people like me to be able to stand here. I know I was born on first base because my grandparents made sacrifices for my father to be able to step up to the plate and swing for the fences. And swing for the fences he did. Breaking down color barriers in his own right, gave his life to public service. Died one day at a dinner table. But what did not die with him was an appreciation, an understanding, a recognition of where we have been, what we have been through, how we got here, and what we must do to ensure that future generations enjoy the same opportunity. It is now my privilege to yield to the Honorable Representative Janelle Bynum from the great state of Oregon.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I rise today as the first, but not the last, Black member of Congress in Oregon's history to celebrate Black History Month in these hallowed halls of Congress. Listening to brother figures speak has me a bit choked up. We're the next generation. See, it's not lost on me that I'm just one generation removed from segregation. My mother graduated from Whittemore High School in Conway, South Carolina, in the class of 1970, a segregated class. Graduated valedictorian without a future. That wasn't that long ago. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to be a groundbreaker because of what that means, not just for my children, but for young people all across my state, and for them to see that change is possible, and then when something big has never been done before, that it just might be because you haven't accomplished it yet. As a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, I'm reminded that I'm not in this fight alone. They were always there with me, 3,000 miles away, never leaving me alone. We are a community of leaders, Mr. Speaker, united in our goal to shape a more equitable and prosperous and just society. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, this Black History Month, we recommit ourselves to continuing to make progress together. We are here not just for our children, but for our children's children. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, happy Black History Month. I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to the Honorable Chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus from the state of New York.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank Congresswoman Janelle Bynum of Oregon, from the great state of Oregon, Congressman Shamari Figures from the great state of Alabama for co-anchoring tonight's Congressional Black Caucus Special Order Hour. I rise today with my colleagues of the Congressional Black Caucus to commemorate Black History Month and to reflect on the innumerable contributions to our country that Black Americans have made throughout our nation's history. During Black History Month, we celebrate the generations of Black Americans whose courage, advocacy, sacrifice, and patriotism have moved our nation and the world forward. From Reconstruction to the Great Migration, to the success of Black Wall Street, to the Jazz Age and the Harlem Renaissance, to the Civil Rights Movement and beyond, there's no time in history that Black people have not contributed to the vitality and success of our country. As chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, I am proud that as our caucus has grown from 13 visionary members in 1971 to a historic 62 members in the year 2025, 4 of whom serve in the United States Senate, we have continued fighting to dismantle barriers, create opportunities, and protect the rights of our communities. Throughout our nation's history, the Congressional Black Caucus has been called to confront countless threats to our communities, to our educational attainment, to our economic prosperity, to our health and well-being. Time and again, we have answered the call and stood in the breach on behalf of Black America and the values that make our country strong. Under the shadow of the Trump administration, we are being called to yet another unprecedented and consequential time in the history and life of our country that we must address head on. With the creation of the 14th Amendment, America took one step towards rectifying its original sin of slavery and protecting the birthright citizenship of all Black Americans. Threats from President Trump to the 14th Amendment have put Black America once again in a perilous position. Today, we are facing cruelty and threats to the very fabric of our democracy and our existence. And as the Trump administration seeks to continue to take our country back in time, the Congressional Black Caucus stands at the front lines of protecting our communities and calling out these and other thinly veiled attempts to erase centuries of progress for Black America. This administration's recent actions aimed at taking away critical tools of success, our fundamental freedoms, will not go unaddressed. On the shoulders of our founders, we will continue to push back against efforts to impede our progress, erase our history, cut off our access to capital, and better opportunities in our communities. This month and every month, we will continue to make clear that the contributions of Black Americans will not and cannot be erased, undermined, or undone. We will continue to fight for access to the ballot box, fair representation, diversity initiatives, and our fundamental freedoms, which are sadly under threat each and every day. As the conscience of the Congress, we will not sit back and be silent as these attacks are on our communities continue. Our history, Black history, is American history, and we are not going back. Thank you, and I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to the gentlewoman from the great state of Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm so honored and privileged to be here tonight to really speak on the Congressional Black Caucus, our special order hour tonight specific to honoring Black History Month. Mr. Speaker, and those that are here tonight, I am pleased to join tonight's special order hour honoring Black History Month, my Black history, my people, my community. As the second vice chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, it is vitally important to me that we commemorate the stories and the triumphs of Black Americans all year long, and especially during Black History Month. I am the daughter of civil rights leaders. My father was the Illinois branch president of the NAACP and served on its executive board for over 25 years. I grew up in the struggle. I grew up in the marches. I grew up in the rallies. And I certainly learned how to sing "We Shall Overcome" because it's what I sang with my family all of the time that I can remember. And so I draw upon the strength of these experiences, the experiences and the strength of my mother and my father during a time which feels not unlike the uncertainty of the 1960s. And though there are those who may feel discouraged that we are fighting the same bigotry and the same hatred, going down the same road that my parents fought against, that Dr. King fought against, that Rosa Parks and Fannie Lou Hamer fought against, that our dear friend and beloved colleague, John Lewis, fought against. I continue to look to the civil rights movement as a reminder that we are not powerless. Our voices and our role as legislators in this body give us all the tools that we need to speak up, to stand up, and to fight back for Black America, but for all of America. It's what my father did. It's what my mother did. Even during a time when diners charged him more money for a cup of coffee than the white man sitting next to him. And I can remember as a child living in Chicago, Illinois, going into a local Walgreens. And I remember standing there with my family, all of them fair skin, red hair, brown hair, and freckles, and me, the brownest child in the family, being told I couldn't go sit with my family because they didn't believe I was a part of my family. So it's these kinds of experiences that I will fight for the rest of my life to make sure that no child, no individual in this country ever feels discriminated against. It's what my father did. It's what I did as a grieving mother. When my son Jordan was killed by a white man who simply didn't like the loud music that he was playing in his car. And it's what we must do now. As a presidential administration emboldened by hatred and vengeance seeks to weaken and dismantle federal programs which support our veterans, care for our seniors, and defend our nation from public health emergencies, just to name a few. What we must continue to do as we face threats of erasing Black history, American history, we must continue to fight from our classrooms and from our textbooks. We must stand up. Black America must speak out. And we must remember our responsibility to act, not just to react, in the best interest of all the American people. And in the face of attacks on minority communities in a nation where our diversity is truly our strength. It's more important than ever that we celebrate the progress of this nation, and Black history is part of this nation, of every step which brings us closer to forming a more perfect union. We've been promised that by this Constitution. We've been promised that by this country. And I know that we will continue to fight every step of the way to fulfill that promise. In my time in Congress, I've been privileged to represent a rich tapestry of this nation, woven by the many threads which make us uniquely American. I have been proud to represent one of the most diverse congressional districts in America, and I am honored to represent so many talented local leaders who have blazed a trail and accomplished many firsts in their community. In my current district, 8 mayors or county executives are the first Black people to ever serve in those positions. Cobb County Commission Chairwoman Lisa Cupid, College Park Mayor Bianca Motley Broom, Douglasville Mayor Rochelle Robinson, Fairburn Mayor Mario Avery, Fayetteville Mayor Ed Johnson, Mableton Mayor Michael Owens, Palmetto Mayor Teresa Thomas Smith, and Powder Springs Mayor Al Thurman. These leaders can be proud of the fact that they were the first, and I take pride in knowing that they will certainly not be the last. The fact that I was elected the first Black representative of Georgia's 6th Congressional District, the first Democrat to hold that seat since 1979, the first person of color to ever hold that seat in 2018 is a testament to the progress in our state and to the work of leaders on the ground in Black America. I am grateful for all those who have paved the path of progress for me and all future leaders to follow in their footsteps. Mr. Speaker, we face extraordinary and unprecedented challenges in this moment. But this month, and always, we will celebrate the strength of America's diversity, the unity of her people, and our unwavering determination to leave behind a brighter tomorrow for our future generations, for our children. They deserve that. Because of celebrations of African Americans that we're talking about under this special hour, I have every confidence that my people will overcome. And I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to the gentlewoman from the great state of New Jersey.
Thank you to Rep. and Rep. Figures for organizing this special hour. Mr. Speaker, I rise to celebrate Black History Month and the profound and vibrant legacy of the many Black Americans who have made our country. Black history is a living, breathing narrative that enriches our nation and influences our daily lives. It is a powerful testament to resilience, creativity, and the pursuit of justice. We think about those who came before us and fought for freedom, trailblazers like Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth, whose voices paved the way. As only the second Black woman ever elected to Congress to represent New Jersey, I stand on the shoulders of giants, including my colleague, mentor, and friend, Rep. Bonnie Watson Coleman. And we both are here because of the path that leaders like Shirley Chisholm blazed before us. With the highest ever membership to the Congressional Black Caucus, 62 members strong, we've never been stronger. We represent the dreams of our ancestors, and those dreams are in danger by this administration's hateful policies that hurt Black people nationwide. Our hard-fought progress is threatened by the racist agenda pushed forward by this administration, but we will not back down. In the words of the late, great John Lewis, we have been too quiet for too long. There comes a time when you have to say something. You have to make a little noise. You have to move your feet. This is the time. Together, we must make a little noise and create good trouble to protect the progress we have fought so hard for. Together, we can ensure that the stories and contributions of our community continue to inspire and uplift future generations ahead. Thank you, and Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to the gentlewoman from New Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you to Representative Figueres and Bynum I stand before you tonight to honor and to celebrate Black History Month. Black History Month is not just a celebration, but a reminder of the struggles, achievements, resilience, and contributions of Black Americans throughout our nation's history. And in New Mexico, it's the opportunity to honor and celebrate that Black history is not only American history, it is New Mexico history, especially as so many Black leaders are blazing the way for future generations. Judge Shamara Henderson, the first Black judge to serve in the New Mexico Court of Appeals, Senator Harold Pope, the first Black state senator to serve in the history of the state of New Mexico. Councilor Nicole Rogers, the first Black woman to serve on Albuquerque City Council, and Representative Pamela Herndon, who is the first Black State House representative to represent State House District 28, which is my State House representative in Albuquerque. These are just a few of the New Mexico leaders who are making history as we stand on this floor tonight, who are leading the way, whose voices are not only needed but necessary, and who must be at all the tables where decisions are being made. But as we know, these voices are currently being threatened by systemic attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion, as thousands of federal employees have been fired and put on leave. Funding for programs has been gutted, schools and public institutions have been threatened, and leaders like General Charles C.Q. Brown Jr., who have proudly served this great country with the highest levels of distinction, have found themselves targeted and dismissed. So we must be real about the moment that we face. These policies and cuts are not just policy decisions. They are about undermining the fundamental justice and equity of the United States, about erasing our history and turning back the clock on the progress of countless generations who have struggled and marched and fought to move this country forward. That is why we must and we will continue to fight back in Congress, in the courts, and in our communities, and to continue that work of bending the arc of the moral universe and this country towards justice, because this is the work ahead for all of us and the work we will and must do. I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to the gentlewoman from the great state of Ohio.
Mr. Speaker, I rise tonight to first say thank you to our co-anchors, freshmen, only freshmen in this House, but certainly seasoned in the life that they have led. So I thank you, Congressman Figures and Congresswoman Bynum, and to our Madam Chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. Mr. Speaker, tonight you will hear many stories of Black history, which is definitely American history. I rise today because Black sacrifice and excellence has shaped our nation. We stand on the shoulders of many brave soldiers and sojourners, but tonight I choose to salute living legends. I salute the 62 members of the Congressional Black Caucus, 4 Black members for the first time serving in our United States Senate, and 58 House members in this Congress, the largest in our history. As we say in the Baptist Church, we've come a mighty long way. From 1971, when 13 members sat in this House floor, 12 Black men from across this nation, and 1 brave, courageous, bad sister, Shirley Chisholm. My, have we come a long way. But today we come tonight and we speak truth to power in this most unprecedented time in our nation's history. A time when we are fighting for civil rights and justice. A time when we are fighting just to ask for an opportunity for a broader talent base, something we call diversity, equity, and inclusion. Programs like Medicaid and Medicare, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, FAA, and funding for HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. Federal jobs being taken away from individuals with little or no notice, and promise of payments that has only fallen short, or to be said that they would get it and found out only to be lies. Tonight, we will answer what the people are asking for. What are we doing? Well, I can tell you that the Congressional Black Caucus is standing up for justice. I can tell you that the Congressional Black Caucus is going back into our communities and we are holding teletown halls. I can tell you that we are responding to the American people because we know what's at stake. We know that if we will not stand up for them and fight for them, that little might not happen. I can tell you that we are communicating. I can tell you that we are legislating. I can tell you that we are standing with the lawyers who are litigating. We are fighting to protect and pursue opportunities that gives Black Americans the same advantages that white Americans have enjoyed since our nation's founding. Our history is made stronger and more vibrant. And just when Black Americans think that we are equal, we are still fighting for equal rights. So here we are, from chaos, confusion with this administration, but we are still leading. Former chairs, now ranking members. If I did a roll call, Mr. Speaker, I would tell you that we have people like Maxine Waters and Bobby Scott and Benny Thompson and Gregory Meeks leading some of the most prestigious committees in this Congress. I would tell you that we have so many people who possess law degrees that it would be like having a roll call of who's who to tell you that even in our freshman class, if I started by saying Turner and Fields and Bell and Conway and Figures, and then Sykes and McCullen and Lee and Crockett and Johnson and Sewell and Meeks and Neguse and Jeffries and Bishop, all possess law degrees. All who stand with we. We have some of the best orators in the country. I could say Ayanna Pressley, and I can tell you historians like Jim Clyburn. I could tell you that we are fighting because we possess those talents and skills because we have suffered along the way. You've heard the stories of our parents. You've heard the stories of our grandparents. We just don't come tonight for a special order to tell you our stories. But we want America to know that we are suffering. We want America to know that we stand with them in this time when we're in trouble. Just last night, I was on a call with WIN with Black women and WIN with Black men. A call that was prompted several months ago during the election when 44 Black women got on a call, 44,000 Black women got on a call, and 50-some thousand Black men got on a call. And just as tonight when a white woman joined us, white women and white dudes got on the call because we knew that America was in trouble. And last night, I am so proud to say as I close that we stood up for another sojourner, a sojourner who had been fighting for us as she went on air every night. And so we also say thank you to Joy Reid for what she has done, and to let her know that we too are lifting her up. And we are also celebrating those who too will give us a voice, whether it is on traditional media, legacy media, social media, podcasts. See, we are coming after those who are coming after us, Mr. Speaker. We want America to know that we will not be silent even against this administration. We will not sit down. We will protest. We will resist. We will do all the things that our forefathers did. We will do all the things that those shoulders that we stand on, what they did, we will do, because this America belongs to us, and we will fight for justice, dignity, equity, diversity, inclusion, because we too are part of America. Black history is American history. Thank you, and I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to another distinguished gentlewoman from the state of Ohio.
I want to, Mr. Speaker, I want to first thank the Congressman from Alabama, Mr. Figueres, and also Congresswoman Bynum from the state of Oregon, and the chair of the Black Caucus, Yvette Clarke of New York, for inviting me to speak this evening. And I rise as we celebrate Black History Month to honor an extraordinary American hero that I had the great pleasure to know. From my home community in Ohio, Lieutenant Colonel Harold H. Brown. He was a Tuskegee Airman, and this is a bronze statue that was cast in our region as part of our Air Force Museum, honoring his astounding life. He was a warrior for justice on many fronts and an unwavering patriot. He was always happy. His story is one of resilience, excellence, and service, embodying the very best of our nation's ideals. From a young age, Harold dreamed of soaring through the skies. I don't know where he got that idea, but just at 19 years old, he turned that dream into reality as a pilot in the legendary Tuskegee Airmen. These were a heroic group of African American aviators who defied both gravity and systemic racism to serve their country during World War II. And as others have referenced tonight, we stand on their shoulders. Harold flew combat missions with unparalleled skill and valor. He loved to fly, taking on some of the most dangerous missions over war-torn Europe. But his service came at great risk. And the plane you see there, he liked to fly privately also, and would wear a scarf around his neck. He was a great teacher, and he managed community colleges after his service. But during one of his many missions, his plane was shot down in battle, and he was captured as a prisoner of war. Even in captivity, Harold never wavered in his duty to his country. After the war, he continued to serve, answering the call again during the brutal Korean War. He answered the call. His legacy extended beyond the battlefield. He became an educator, beloved, a mentor, and a champion for the desegregation of the United States military. The impact of Harold Brown and his fellow Tuskegee Airmen is immeasurable in this country. The Red Tails, as they were known, flew more than, get ready for this, 15,000 sorties between 1943 and 1945, earning a reputation as some of the most skilled pilots in the United States military. Bomber crews specifically requested their escort, knowing the Tuskegee Airmen would protect them against enemy attacks. They were angels in the sky. They were so brave. They fought not only against the forces of fascism abroad, but again, the deep-seated racism at home, paving the way for the desegregation of the armed forces, with the leadership from Ohio setting a precedent for generations to come. Right in my district of Toledo, the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen lives on. And the area around us in northern Ohio, Ohio is known as the state of flight, and 58 of these brave aviators called Ohio home, with several hailing from the greater Toledo area, and Harold himself from Port Clinton and Points East. Their contributions to our armed forces and to our communities remain an indelible part of our history. Institutions such as the Toledo-Lucas County Public Library, the National Museum of the Great Lakes, and the Liberty Aviation Museum in Port Clinton, Ohio, where this photo was taken, have preserved their stories, ensuring that future generations will remember their courage and their sacrifice. These men were not just warriors in the sky, they were pioneers who shattered social and racial barriers, proving their excellence time and again, despite the discrimination they faced. But despite their heroism, their place in history has not always been respected. Just recently, sadly, we witnessed a shameful attempt to erase the legacy of Harold Brown and countless others who fought with him and for this country. Under the Trump administration, the U.S. Department of Defense, following a sweeping executive order, removed diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, including historical education on renowned figures, including the Tuskegee Airmen and the Women's Air Force Service pilots. A training program that honored these heroes was halted. Their history was nearly erased in the name of a stupid and mean-spirited political agenda that sought to rewrite America's past to fit a narrow, exclusionary narrative. This was more than an insult to the African American community. It was an insult to America itself. It was an affront to every soldier, airman, sailor, and Marine who fought not just for our country, but for the ideals upon which it stands. The removal of these Defense Department programs was a deliberate attempt to diminish the contributions of African Americans in the military and to erase the struggles they overcame in their fight for justice and equality. But let this be a lesson. The power of the American people is stronger than any one administration. When this erasure was exposed, when the outrage of everyday citizens, not just black, not just brown, but white, demanded justice, the American people forced a reckoning with the U.S. Department of Defense and the President of the United States. Public outcry led to the reinstatement of the course honoring the Tuskegee Airmen. Truth cannot be silenced, and history cannot be rewritten to serve the will of the few. We, the people, hold the power to safeguard our history. The legacy of Harold Brown and his daring, patriotic fellow airmen has been restored, not because those in power willingly chose to do so, but because Americans of conscience refuse to allow their contributions to ever be forgotten. This is a testament to the enduring power of truth and justice, and a reminder that each American must remain vigilant in protecting both truth and justice. As we honor Harold Brown today, and he never wanted honor, but the entire community, most of whom were Caucasian like myself, came out. There were music and joy, and there was happiness in his memory. We remember his service, but also we remember his fight. Let us carry forward his mission, not just in the skies, but in every arena where justice is challenged, where history is threatened, and where the sacrifices of our ancestors and predecessors risk being erased. We owe it to Harold Brown and his family. We owe it to the Tuskegee Airmen and their families. We owe it to ourselves and to future generations in the American family. Harold Brown and the Tuskegee Airmen of Northern Ohio changed the world for the better, and so can we. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Mr. Speaker, as we bring this special order to a close, I want to again highlight the fact that the celebration of Black history is not a celebration of just a few individuals who did some notable things. Black history is about celebrating the faith that an entire people, an entire culture had in the potential of what this nation could be, a faith that was unshakable, a faith in their God, a faith in this nation, a faith that America could be America for them too. They held on to this. We still hold on to it. Through the darkest days of this country, when Black people could literally only hold on to security in four walls of a church, where they could sing hymns like "I will trust in the Lord," or "Pass me not, O gentle Savior," or "Take my hand, precious Lord. Lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn. Through the night, through the storm, lead me on to the light." That is where we come from. I stand here before you just 3 generational lines removed from slavery. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's how close we are from where we came from. And so the faith that my great grandparents had, at that same generational line where we had people born in my family into slavery to come just 3 generations. It's that same faith that leads me here. It's that same faith that led my father to break down those color barriers at an institution where just a few years before a governor stood and declared segregation today, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever. It is that same faith that led him to apply to that law school where just a few years before his older brother applied and was told, send us a picture. And he refused to do so. And so we celebrate that faith. We celebrate that resilience, that resolve, that perseverance. That is what Black History Month is about. And that is why we continue to hold on to that faith, because we too believe that America is still America for us too. It's America for all of us. And so, Mr. Speaker, I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman yields. Under the Speaker's announced policy,